Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Jimmy at the Crossroads as it's episode 69. Today's show will be focusing in on left-wing double standards, Washington Examiner Wednesday, and the return of sports. Stay tuned, that's all coming up. Keep it right here, Jimmy at the Crossroads.
And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations, oh what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style, which, of course, is all about making sense out of nonsense in the process, just as the great Biff Gore sings in our special theme song, which, by the way, you can download for purchase at jimmyatthecrossroads.com if you click on shop, or go to shop.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. You can also get t-shirts and face masks and a tote bag and so much more. Log on jimmyatthecrossroads.com or go to shop.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. Great to be with you today here on the program. If you have not subscribed, please do so on the YouTube channel. Jimmy at the Crossroads on YouTube, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. You see it right here. Tweet at me, at Sang Center. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And also, like the page, Jimmy Sengenberger, media personality, facebook.com/Jimmy Sengenberger Pro. Be sure to check all of that out. In addition to jimmyatthecrossroads.com and, of course, jimmysengenberger.com. Remember, there's no A, no I, no U in Sengenberger. It's all E's all the time. Once you know that, Sengenberger is easy. And, by the way, there is a Doing It Sang Style t-shirt at shop.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. And there's also a Sengenberger all E's all the time t-shirt. Gotta love it, being creative here. Also want to encourage you to check out our partners and friends at the Washington Examiner. WashingtonExaminer.com, of course, the place to go for great reporting and commentary. Also check them out and like, subscribe, all those good things on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Once again, I am Jimmy Sengenberger. Pleasure and a privilege to be with you today. It's Washington Examiner Wednesday, so in a little bit, I will be joined by Nihal Krishan, who is a reporter, economic policy reporter at the Washington Examiner. We've got several stories we're going to dive into with Nihal. He's a great guest. Looking forward to having a conversation. And then also, Nathan Matoush, producer extraordinaire, working the Matoush Magic day in and day out. He's going to come on and give us some sense for what's going to happen in the world of sports later on in the show. But first, double standards of the left. We've talked about it several times on this program, including the protest double standard. Keep in mind that during the lockdown protests, people were saying on the left, you shouldn't go protest. Stay at home, abide by the law. But then a protest they approve of, one spurred on by the senseless murder of George Floyd, these protests across the country that were spurred on by that murder by a police officer, resulted in protests that they felt were okay. Not just okay, they even encouraged people to jump in to those protests, to go participate. In fact, even physicians did that. There was a whole organizational effort earlier this month that's called White Coats for Black Lives. And that is physicians who went out to protest and specifically said this is okay to participate in these protests because systemic racism is a sort of virus as well. In fact, if you go to pick 2, let's put up Mr. Matoush, pick 2, there were those saying that these protests were essential to America. An op-ed earlier this month in the New York Times entitled, "As a Black Doctor, Should I Choose My Skin Color or My Health?" said the following: "These protests are necessary for the recognition and eradication of injustice. These protests are the first dose of medicine needed to rid the system of metastatic racism. To ask, what do you think as a black doctor about COVID-19 and the protests is to ask me to choose my skin color or my health. This is precisely the false choice black Americans make all the time, which we should cease to make today. The answer to both is the same: enact policies that do not systemically disenfranchise and endanger black people." In other words, they have a reason that they think is very strongly presented for these kinds of protests. They have a reason for saying that participating in these protests trumps concern about the virus. They have a reason for saying the protests should happen and physicians should even be a part of it and endorse it. Now, one can argue in favor of their case. For the purposes of this conversation today, I don't really care. I don't care if that protest is merited or not. If it is a protest and the Constitution protects both the freedom to peaceably assemble and the right to free speech, you should be able to peaceably assemble in protest regardless of the cause. And politicians and elites and doctors shouldn't be making that sort of determination. The double standard is very clear. We think this is an important health issue, systemic racism. Therefore, it justifies a protest calling for public policy changes across the country. Now, I would say that the health issues, and in fact I have many times on this program, that the health issues associated with the lockdowns, mental health debilitations, suicides, the inability to go get a biopsy to find out if you've had cancer, you've got cancer, and it's malignant and you need the tumor to be removed, the consequences of losing jobs en masse and potentially being out of work for years. You put all of those things and many more together in terms of health issues. Absolutely, there is a health case. If we want to get into debating whether or not a protest is merited, which again we should not, government should not be making that sort of determination. But if we want to have that kind of a debate, I will absolutely make the case every day of the week and twice on Sundays that the lockdowns are also absolutely have affected the health of millions of Americans in dramatically adverse ways other than COVID-19. So that was a double standard we dealt with before, but now there's another. Washington State has just mandated that everybody across the state must wear a mask. However, one county, Lincoln County, has decided to make an exception. This county, in pick 1, has made several exceptions. One of them about health conditions related to wearing a mask, another about children, okay. People with disabilities, all right. I could follow along with that. But then you get to number 4. People of color who have heightened concerns about racial profiling and harassment due to wearing face coverings in public. Look at that line. Heightened concerns. In other words, it's very subjective. Not only is there an exception made, but it is a subjective exception made for the individual to decide if they don't want to wear a mask or do want to wear a mask. Let's put up pick 3. The United States Constitution, ironically in the 14th Amendment, which was put into place during Reconstruction to protect the rights, especially of freed slaves, states this: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. That last point is the most important relative to this Washington County's policy of let's make a subjective exception based on the concerns of an individual. Nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. That means that the government of Washington State and those who are part of that state are forbidden from treating people unequally. That is not to say that that hasn't been done. Absolutely it has. I'm not arguing that the Constitution has been perfectly followed. I would never argue such a thing. I am a conservative, after all, who believes that the federal government has gone well beyond the Constitution, and states have gone well beyond the U.S. Constitution in some cases, and certainly their own constitutions. So make no mistake, I don't believe that the Constitution has been perfectly followed. I'm not arguing that. But what I am arguing here is that this is a violation expressly of equal protection under the law. First of all, I don't think a mask requirement should be made anyway, should be issued anyway. Nobody should be required by the state to wear a mask. But if you are going to make such a statement, unless it is very directly tied to something that makes sense, like children, disabilities, or a health issue that would make you adversely affected directly by it, you can't make some kind of exception and vague and broad exception to what is being enforced as the law, even though it's not a law, it's arbitrary by the state. You must abide by it. Okay, you should have to abide by it regardless of the color of your skin. The double standards presented by the left are fundamentally wrong on every level, including levels they should be advocating for. But alas, here we are in our society today. If you are on board with their view, or you exemplify some particular position that they have taken, you get a pass. It's okay. But if you disagree, if you take a different position, if you come at things in a different way, or if you're not part of a particular group that they've decided needs special treatment, in the case of this Lincoln County, Washington exemption, well, so what? We don't really care. That's not a free society. As Thomas Jefferson said, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, and we must make sure to be eternally vigilant. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. This is Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner, and it is Washington Examiner Wednesday. In just a few moments, we will be joined by economic policy reporter Nihal Krishan to talk about several different and very interesting stories going on as we continue here, once again, on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, this is Frankie.
Hey, and I'm Angelo. We're the owners of F&A Pizzeria. If you're looking for the best pizza in town, remember us. F&A.
Hey, we got the best crust.
F&A.
We got the best cheese.
F&A.
We got the best sauce.
F&A, man.
Put it all together, what do you got?
F&A.
Yeah, you got that right. F&A.
F&A Pizza on the corner of Hell Yeah Avenue and Dam Straight Street.
You're an entrepreneur.
I'll give you the alternative.
You're an entrepreneur. You've got to create 30 million jobs over 3 years.
Yeah.
Tell me what companies can do that.
So, first
tell me
of
what
all,
20 or 50 or 100 companies can do that.
I can't tell you a specific companies that can do that because I don't know. In fact,
Or investors.
But
Pick
I
the
don't.
greatest investors of
Right.
all time.
Well, but I don't presume to think that I know who's going to be the best investor, the best company to do that. Just as I don't think the government is, that I can presume that the government's going to be effective to do that.
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, with all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said.
Has been on a determined campaign to convince the world that everything is hunky-dory. And when the government actually spends so much effort trying to convince you of something, you got to be very suspicious.
Your lawyers don't tell you even all the evidence that the government has given them, the few meager disclosures that were made literally at the 11th hour after you'd already been coerced into pleading guilty.
Hours of video evidence of Nancy Pelosi coming up on your porches and jujitsuing your precious packages, while Chuck Schumer waits in the street in the getaway van because he's too afraid to be a man and do his own dirty work.
Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Is it scary that YouTube and Twitter and Facebook have this kind of power over us? Of course it is. But you know what? These things didn't always exist, and they won't always exist. David beat Goliath. The little guy can beat the big guy.
So we have to figure out ways to fight in which we are able to have that kind of reach. We can build our own megaphones. And this is a little bit of a longer term project. It goes beyond Trump's re-election because it affects every election.
I'm good, man. It's a partnership. We're like this, Jimmy. I got you.
Jimmy, can I tell you that I've done about 200 shows in the last 3 weeks for this book tour? This has been by far my favorite interview.
And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master. Now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of no sense.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And folks, let's get back to your host of Jimmy at the Crossroads. He's been doing it sang style for, 10 years now? Jimmy Sengenberger, ladies and gentlemen.
Certainly on AM radio for just about a decade, coming up this September. Although I will say that when you factor in my time doing talk radio at Regis University, 12 years this coming September. Good to be with you. Jimmy at the Crossroads. I am Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner on this Wednesday, June 24th. Such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you today. Thanks so much for joining us. Again, please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not done so already at Jimmy at the Crossroads, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads, as well as follow me on Twitter at Sang Center, Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. You see that right on the screen there. And also, Be sure to like my Facebook page, Jimmy Sengenberger Media Personality, facebook.com/Jimmy Sengenberger Pro, and check out the membership program I established, Jimmy's Crossroads Club, at members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. So today, as I mentioned, is Wednesday, which means it is Washington Examiner Wednesday, where we like to check in with our friends and partners at the Washington Examiner on issues of the day. Be sure to follow the Examiner, of course, on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and also at WashingtonExaminer.com, where you can get the great reporting and commentary. Today, I am pleased to be joined by Nihal Krishan, who is an economic policy reporter at the Washington Examiner, to talk about a few different topics, including some interesting tidbits about President Trump from a former White House economic advisor, and also a bipartisan economic recovery plan. Nihal Krishan, welcome back to the show. It's good to talk with you.
Thanks so much for having me, Jimmy.
Thanks for coming on. So I want to jump in first. You guys had an interesting interview you did with Casey Mulligan from the formerly of the White House, an advisor over in the economic side of the equation. And I'm curious if you could just kind of set the stage for us, because there are a couple of particular stories you've got on the Examiner website about this that I want to dive into. But how did this come about? There's a new book, I guess, that Casey Mulligan has out.
Yeah, certainly. So this was, we've had a series of stories and some great scoops because he's written this new book called "You're Hired: The Successes and Failures of the Trump Administration." And he was the former chief economist for Trump for his Council of Economic Advisors from 2018 to 2019. And so now that he's left the administration, he's written one of these classic Trump tell-all books like John Bolton and others have done. Kind of outlining his experiences there, private conversations and engagements, but also his thoughts on, the policies that have come out of the administration, some that he shaped and supported and some that he did not. And fortunately, we at the Examiner were able to get an exclusive copy of his book before it's even been published. And that's where we've gotten these stories on some of Trump's exaggerations, for example, and ways to manipulate the media when whether it comes to lobbying efforts of the car industry, and there's a few other stories that we're going to be breaking this week, all from Casey Mulligan's new Trump tell-all book.
So let's talk about a couple of these stories that you've reported on at WashingtonExaminer.com, Nihal. First, let's talk about the auto lobby. There's a claim by Mulligan that the Trump administration didn't go as far as it was wanting to do originally in terms of these auto standards, for particularly fuel economy standards. What's he claiming?
So he's claiming that initially the Trump administration and, specifically Trump himself wanted to roll back all of the car emission standards that Obama had put in place. It was one of President Obama's chief policy elements when it came to climate change. And, it would have kept the car emission regulations at 5%. Trump initially wanted to roll that back completely down to zero, but because of a pretty aggressive lobbying effort by car companies, Mulligan claims that the Trump administration only partially rolled back those car emission standards, and now it's at 1.5%, for example, and his allegation is that because of the lobbying efforts by car companies, the Trump administration changed their mind, that the car companies lobbied Trump's National Economic Council and Department of Transport and EPA. And most importantly, it's that his allegation that the car companies would profit by the car emission standards remaining higher because they could use that as a scapegoat to charge consumers higher prices.
A couple of months ago, I had the opportunity on this program to speak with Andrew Wheeler, the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, and we talked about the fuel economy standards. And I want to go back to April of this year and play a snippet of that interview, the portion where he's talking about the positivity of the change to CAFE standards.
We just finalized our CAFE standards for cars a couple of weeks ago. And what it did is replaced the second half of the Obama regulations. The Obama regulations were in two halves, and we just replaced the second half. The first half that they did back in 2012 projected by 2026 that half of the cars on the road would be electric vehicles. Right now it's less than 5%, and there's no way we would ever meet the 50%. So their standards were based on that premise, and that was what they were driving to. And that's ignoring what Americans want to buy, the cars they want to purchase, and as a result, the average age of cars on the road today is now 12 years old. It used to be 8, because people are holding onto their cars longer because the cars that are being produced aren't the cars that people want to buy, or they're too expensive. So we did our regulation. It's going to help lower the price of new cars, and it's going to allow automobile manufacturers to continue to produce cars that meet environmental standards that people want to purchase. To me, that's very common.
Common sense, he says. Yes. I think, first of all, that he was pretty bullish on those changes. I certainly was myself, because I agree with at least going that far, but I think I would be on board with the view that we should have gone further from my personal standpoint. But what's interesting is what you're saying that Casey Mulligan is saying is that the Trump administration didn't go further because of car companies, but also you have environmental interests that already think that they went too far with the CAFE standards. So that's an interesting element to this too.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, of course, you have environmental organizations and Democrats that would very much have wanted the Obama regulations at 5% to have remained in place, and felt that those were necessary for protecting the environment, and did not see that consumers are necessarily being charged more for something unfairly. What's interesting about Mulligan's argument is that he says that car companies were claiming that they wanted to roll back they wanted the regulations to remain so that there'd be one national standard that they would have to follow instead of a patchwork from different states. But in fact, Trump's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow himself, said he didn't buy this argument, and said that it was possible that the car companies wanted to keep these regulations in place so that they could charge consumers higher prices. And another key part of Mulligan's allegation is that many agencies within the Trump administration suppressed his report, which showed the data that consumers were being charged higher prices for not much environmental protections.
You know, what's interesting to me about this whole story is that it's another instance of sort of regulatory capture by private sector industry, if true, if Mulligan's claim were to be borne out, because it is an example of a major industry in America, the auto industry, saying, auto manufacturers in particular, saying, hey, this is going to benefit us if you don't go that far in deregulating. So in an instance where you have a major industry saying, keep the more excessive regulations because it benefits our bottom line.
Exactly. That's what makes it so stunning is, like, I remember I asked Larry Kudlow, Trump's chief economic advisor, why would the car companies want higher, more stringent regulation? Wouldn't that hurt them? I mean, there's just like flies in the face of conventional wisdom. But, I mean, when their bottom line is at stake and they can use a government regulation to maybe make more money instead of less, then sometimes, wacky things start happening.
Well, it's like there's these zero emission standards, and there's it's the battery advancements that there was particular regulation. I'm trying to remember what it was, but Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, was advocating in an op-ed a year or two ago for this particular battery-powered car mandate. I forget the specifics, for that exact same reason, because GM was particularly expanding more and more into that realm of battery-powered vehicles. So it is striking. But that's not the only tidbit that you've been reporting on so far in regards to Mulligan and his book and your interview with him. Nihal Krishan, again, our guest economic policy reporter at the Washington Examiner. He also says that President Trump had a very specific and thought-out strategy for manipulating the media in order to report some of the positive developments under his administration. What's he saying?
So Mulligan is saying that through various private instances that he's interactions that he's had with the president and other economic advisors, that Trump makes this gamble that he will exaggerate or stretch the truth on certain accomplishments of his in order to attract attention within the media. So, for example, whether if you look at his like GDP numbers in 2018, he had record levels of growth, 3.1%, the most in 12 years. But then when that didn't get a lot of attention, he decided to start saying it was the most economic growth in 20 years or in 30 years. And so, when he has accomplished something, but he doesn't get the attention that he thinks he deserves for it, he starts to kind of stretch the truth a little bit and exaggerate in the hopes that the media will either call him out on his exaggeration, or will report that it's better than it is. And so it's a what he calls a strategic tactic to manipulate the media and fact checkers into giving more attention to something that Trump feels is getting underplayed.
The great irony of this is that if what Mulligan's saying in terms of strategy is true, and it seems pretty clear to me that it very well could be a specific strategy on the president's part, then basically the media consistently cries about how President Trump is lying or exaggerating, and they go ahead and they clarify what the facts are. And what is funny about that is then they end up speaking about these different things that are good, positive developments under President Trump that maybe they weren't otherwise doing in order to correct him. So even though they're criticizing him for lying or exaggerating, they seem to be playing right into his hand.
Precisely. That's exactly what Mulligan's argument is, that maybe it's not the most morally or ethically virtuous strategy to employ, but it has the results, and he's actually able to execute on bringing greater attention to, for example, like drug prices falling in his administration, the GDP numbers that I talked about, or achievements that he's had for the Black and African American community. These are all things that he just felt that there wasn't a lot of talk about, and then when he starts to kind of smudge and stretch things a bit, then he starts to get attention. And it's a gamble, and it's for voters to decide whether they think it's fair or not.
So I do want to go back to the previous story, Mulligan's story about the fuel economy standards, because I don't think that we emphasize one point, which is that the account that Mulligan presents that the auto industry got involved in and convinced the Trump administration not to go any further is disputed.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. As was clearly outlined in our story, both individuals at the Department of Transport, the Environmental Protection Agency, and of course Larry Kudlow, who's his chief economic advisor, all disputed the fact. They all agreed that the car companies were very vocal about wanting to keep some part of the regulations, but they disagreed strongly that the Trump administration was successfully lobbied by car companies to try and change the rule. That's Mulligan's allegation, but they pushed back against that.
I just want to make sure that we have that clear, and it is in the story, which is there's a lot of different details and elements, so be sure to check it out, WashingtonExaminer.com, and check out all of our guest Nihal Krishan's reportings for the Examiner. Of course, he is economic policy reporter there. Let's shift gears here. We're looking right now at a very difficult, tumultuous economic environment. Still nearly 40 million Americans out of work as a result of both coronavirus and the government lockdowns and stay-at-home orders, essentially shutting down the economy over the past few months. We're just now starting to see people really getting back to work, but it's a slow-moving process. And so there's a big debate going on in Washington, D.C. about how to handle the economic recovery process, what government should or should not do. And some former economic advisors to presidential administrations, for economists in particular, got together to propose their own plan of attack for helping to spur this recovery along. And Nihal Krishan, what are you reporting for the Examiner as being proposed by some of these former advisors?
Yeah, so These are former advisors. Jason Furman, who was President Obama's economic advisor, President Bush's former economic advisor, and then Timothy Geithner, who was Obama's Treasury Secretary, and then another professor of economics at the University of Maryland. And they have four essential elements within their proposal to grow the economy and allow us to continue to recover as strongly as possible. And they are income support for the unemployed, pandemic employment benefits for low-wage workers, support for small businesses, and support for state and local government in terms of fiscal and financial relief. And so these are the four key tenets that they outline in order to help us in the coming months. As the most pressing ways to help those, particularly those at the bottom end of the economic spectrum.
So in terms of this plan, they're clearly refuting the argument from some conservatives, myself included, that the government shouldn't be doing some extensive programs. Now, they don't want to do everything. They have, as you said, a handful of key planks to this proposal for what should be done at the federal level. But they do counter the argument that we shouldn't do nothing, or that we shouldn't do anything. They say that you do need to take particular steps. Why do they think we still need some fairly substantial government involvement?
So their claims are that if we have no unemployment insurance or benefits and no help for low-wage workers who are not able to earn enough money, then there is going to be even more job losses, that there will be catastrophic damage to the economy, that it'll take longer for the recovery to occur. Basically, they say that, that whatever recovery we've had so far has been propped up substantially and bolstered by the economic spending from the CARES Act and others. And if that doesn't continue, there will be a vacuum and a significant gap that companies and corporations are not going to be able to fill because they're not strong enough to do so yet.
What about the argument that spending from government misallocates resources and can actually slow the recovery? They sort of touch on that in your reporting, although I don't know how far they go in that regard. But what do they say about spending slowing down the recovery as opposed to speeding up, as conservatives would say?
So Jason Furman says unequivocally that there's no evidence whatsoever that greater government spending slows down the recovery or results in less jobs, and furthermore says that their plan takes into account even the possibility that could happen, because the proposals are structured around what they call automatic triggers, and that's an essential part to understand of their plan. And automatic triggers are basically only if the unemployment rate dips beneath a certain point, or let's say economic growth dips beneath a certain point, then that will automatically trigger certain plans of theirs to get into motion, instead of relying upon Congress to keep legislating every time a new issue comes up. Their automatic triggers, if this were to be passed into legislation, would automatically create certain economic actions and initiatives to be put in place.
Something that they refute is the idea put forward by Trump administration officials of reducing the capital gains tax. And they specifically say, no, we shouldn't do this. Now, one of the economists that's party to this plan probably, as one of the, I think it was Jason Furman says, probably would oppose the plan if it were to actually include a increase in the tax on capital gains. That is to say that what has been put forward doesn't include capital gains tax. The three more liberal economists that are part of this would support increasing capital gains taxes if that was the case, at least it seems that way, versus the conservative on the panel who would advocate otherwise. And they specifically note that, okay, that we didn't touch on this, and if we did, there would have been a difference of opinion. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Glenn Hubbard is the conservative, the staunch conservative on their team, amongst their gang of four, and he was President W. Bush's chief economic advisor. And so, he would be absolutely for reducing the capital gains tax, unlike Jason Furman, Obama's former economic advisor. And that would have been a source of friction and fighting between them if this was something that they were considering. But Jason's point, Obama's former advisor's point, was that surprisingly, the conservatives and liberals did not have much disagreement, actually, because of the pandemic and the urgency around it. But they said that outside of these immediate 4 actions that they wanted to take, if we're talking about economic policy more broadly, there would probably be many other disagreements.
Yeah, that is interesting, where they managed to narrow it down to 4 areas of commonality. I still think it goes a little bit too far, but I'm not part of this group of 4. Probably I wouldn't want to be a part of the group of 4 if that was the particular plan. But I do think that it's interesting, this capital gains discussion in Washington, D.C., because that is something that the Trump administration is advocating, particularly because they would like to spur more investment. Now, I'm an advocate personally of eliminating the capital gains tax altogether, which isn't a very common position. But nevertheless, what is sort of the discussion just finally, Nihal Krishan, going on in D.C. about reducing the capital gains tax? Is that something that could actually go anywhere? It doesn't seem so, especially with Democrats in control of the House of Representatives.
There certainly is a huge wellspring of support for this in the Senate and the House from Republicans. Mm-hmm. I think this has been an issue that they have pushed for and championed for a number of years, and the White House is very much backing it as well. But in terms of it realistically becoming law, no, I would say that there's very little chance of that, as you said, with the Democrats controlling the House and being opposed to it. As this is an issue which they see is related to inequality, and that capital gains tax would primarily benefit the rich and the wealthy, and so why would we pass something that would help them when there's lots of people in the middle class or lower class who are suffering? And there's some truth to that argument, that it would primarily help those who are wealthier, who have capital gains in the first place, whereas Republicans say that this is something that could help spur economic growth, and that people having money themselves, even if it's people who are a little wealthier, is to the macroeconomy's benefit.
Well, especially because if you reduce capital gains, this is the argument, which I espouse along with those particular conservatives. The argument is that if you reduce the capital gains tax rate, then you encourage additional investment, because the wealthier people are not just hiding their money under a mattress. They're going to put it to work in investing in various private sector enterprises, which then benefits the overall economy because it can help create jobs and produce better, more innovative products that make people's lives better, so on and so forth. So it will be interesting to see if this can at least gain traction in terms of the media discussion and the discussion among average everyday Americans in terms of economic policies, because it's not something that is getting too much attention, certainly from an in-depth standpoint. But Nihal,
who knows? Maybe,
go ahead,
President Trump maybe President Trump will employ one of his strategic exaggerations when it comes to capital gains tax and make it out to be something a little different or bigger than it is, and people will find out about it.
How about President Trump tweets out, "I want to eliminate the capital gains tax altogether"? Maybe that would do it. What do you think?
It could. I hope he hears this on your show first.
I hope so too. That is brilliant input, Nihal, to really encapsulate everything that we have been discussing in our segment today. Nihal Krishan, economic policy reporter at the Washington Examiner. Great to check in with you again, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
Thank you. Once again, check out Nihal Krishan's reporting. He's economic policy reporter at the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. In just a few moments, let's spend a little bit of time with Matoush. Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush magic. Find out what's going on in terms of sports. It's returning. Sports are returning, but how are they returning? And how might this impact economically, too? I'll give some thoughts on that. You're joining us here at the Crossroads. Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Don't go anywhere.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
We all have rules we have to follow. But what if you could have a direct hand in helping to write the rules that would impact your life or your business? I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, and let's talk about exactly that. There's a lot of talk these days about the Trump administration's efforts to deregulate the American economy. If you think about it, though, deregulation is actually a great thing because it unleashes the unlimited potential of each and every individual. But in a lot of cases, you actually find folks advocating for more regulation, and frequently those people are the ones who will benefit most from the regulation. Such as big businesses like Facebook or General Motors that, if you put in more regulation, would be able to cut out the competition or directly benefit them. For example, putting up higher barriers to entry so that next small business, the next Mark Zuckerberg, won't really be able to get in on some of the action, some of the incredible opportunities. For example, last year we had the data privacy scandals for Facebook. Well, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, went before Congress and testified before a Senate committee.
I think the real question, as the internet becomes more important in people's lives, is what is the right regulation, not whether there should be or
But you
not.
as a company welcome regulation?
I think if it's the right regulation, then yes.
You think the Europeans have it right? So would you work with us in terms of what regulations you think are necessary in your industry?
Absolutely.
Okay. Would you submit to us some proposed regulations?
Yes, and I'll have my team follow up with you so that way we can have this discussion across the different categories where I think that this discussion needs to happen.
Look forward to it.
Now, what did you notice in this video? You had CEO Mark Zuckerberg say that he supports the right regulation, and a United States senator actually asked him to provide some sample regulations to potentially help write the regulations. Big businesses tend to support more regulation because it hurts their upstart competitors, say the next Mark Zuckerberg. That's why General Motors CEO Mary Barra has been advocating for a brand new effort to regulate in advance of the interests of battery-powered cars, which makes perfect sense because Mary Barra has actually begun moving forward with GM toward an electric-only future. So what you have here are big businesses having seats at the table day in and day out to help increase regulations to the disadvantage of smaller competitors. That's a case for less regulation, not more. And it's a message we can get across to millennials today, who are the most innovative generation, perhaps in history. That is a message we need to get across as well. So let's boldly proclaim it.
Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics.
Are you all right with being a shark maverick? Was it okay to team up with you?
I'm good, man. We're a part. It's a partnership. We're like this, Jimmy. I got you.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
And folks, how about a Matoush Magic Sang Style segment? It's coming your way in just a moment here on Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Seems kind of jazzified today in our bumper music as we return here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. I am Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Thanks so much for joining us, being a part of the program. If you have not subscribed already on the YouTube channel, please do, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. Also, like my Facebook page, Jimmy Sengenberger, media personality, facebook.com/Jimmy Sengenberger Pro, and follow me on Twitter at Sang Center, Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And then I didn't give Matoush magic warning about this, but let's talk about the membership program that you have the opportunity to sign up for, which is called the Crossroads Club at members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. This is the exclusive membership program of Jimmy at the Crossroads. Great opportunities, multiple tiers at different levels to get in with different perks of varying kinds. For example, the engraved Jimmy at the Crossroads harmonica with your name on it. Chocolate harmonicas that are just delicious. Also, let's see. Wine tumblers, mugs, other goodies, plus exclusive access with discounts to webinars and courses that we'll be doing online, and so much more. Members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. Log in, sign up today, log on and sign up today, and we hope you'll be a part of this. Join us right at the Crossroads. It's going to be fun. Also, finally, shop.jimmyatthecrossroads.com, your place to go to buy a whole slew of different fun products, including the What Are the 9 Most Terrifying Words in the English Language t-shirt, which looks pretty darn cool. You know what I need to do? I need to get Matoush some images of these shirts and so forth so you can see them for yourself. We'll go ahead and we'll do that coming up in the following days. All right, welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads. Making sense out of nonsense, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, saying style, in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Log on, WashingtonExaminer.com. It's been a little while since we've had our producer extraordinaire, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Matoush Magic himself, Nathan Matoush, on the show. And with all the news about sports returning, I thought we'd bring the return of Nathan Matoush onto the show. Nathan, how the heck are you, my friend?
Jimmy, I'm doing good. It's a pleasure to be back, and sports is in full swing, my friend. It is in full swing. I'm also looking forward to getting myself a Sang-style t-shirt or Jimmy at the Crossroads t-shirt at members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com.
Well said, my friend. You are learning how to weave those things in. So let me say this, by the way. We may do at some point in the near future a Matoush Magic t-shirt. That's what I need. I need to know if other people want it. Nathan wants one. We just might have to offer that at some point. So let me know if you'd get a Matoush Magic t-shirt. All right. So you must be.
Can't wait.
You must be excited about not the Matoush Magic t-shirt that's still up in the air, but the sports returning, Nathan.
Oh yeah, very excited. And yesterday it was official. We are going to have Major League Baseball as the owners approved a deal that would potentially bring back Major League Baseball with a 60-game season. Training camp would begin, or spring training, I guess you'd call it summer training now, would begin July 1st, opening day July 23rd. So definitely looking forward to that. Along with the other sports, NHL, that's coming back at the end of July. Colorado Avalanche are reporting to training camp on July 10th. And then also the NBA, they're going to have a 22-team playoff returning towards the end of July as well. So I'm definitely looking forward to it, man. I mean, sports is back in full swing. We got all the 4 major ones back: Major League Baseball, NHL, NFL they're still set to resume on schedule. Regular season beginning September 10th. Right now we got NASCAR and UFC. So, Jimmy Sengenberger, it's looking like sports is a go, and it's going to be like Christmas Day when these things come back.
Now, what about
3 months without sports?
Crowds in the stands? Is that going to be allowed? Is that something they're holding off on? Do you know?
So crowds in the stands, that's something they're holding off on definitely as the season starts. Now, maybe potentially later on in the seasons, maybe they'll have fans at certain capacities. You know, maybe every other seat will be filled. I'm hearing for the Major League Baseball that immediate family members possibly might be able to attend the games, but as far as full swing fans, that's going to be a while, at least until we could get more testing done.
How about holograms in the audience with a soundtrack?
Holograms in the audience. We could probably make it happen, possibly with the Matoush magic, but I don't know, man. That seems to be way out there.
That would be expensive. That could be done, but it would be expensive. Okay, here's what you do: tape green screen all around the stadiums, and go from there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be creative here. I want crowds in the camera shots when I'm watching these games.
Yeah, and I'm with you.
Even
as
if they're
well.
faked. Even if they're fake crowds.
Well, there's already stadiums, like, for example, the Atlanta Falcons Stadium. They put in crowd noise. They put in crowd noise to boost up their volume of the fans. So, hey, if they could do that, why not have green screens and holograms of people?
Now, you have an image. You got pick 4. That is the NHL lineup here.
Yes.
Go ahead. Show us what's going on here for the playoffs.
So
That's what they're going to structure it as, playoffs?
This is the 2014 playoff for the National Hockey League. Now, the National Hockey League is going to be set to return at the end of July. As we said, the Avs are going to report to training on July 10th. But this is how it's going to be laid out, and it's literally like March Madness-style Stanley Cup playoffs. And I'm really looking forward to this. You got these, well, each conference, first of all, the top 4 teams are going to get a bye, including our boys in the blue and burgundy, the Colorado Avalanche. So they'll get a bye.
Remember, folks, we're broadcasting from here in Colorado.
That's right. And that's why we got to lay out the Colorado Avalanche. So they'll get a bye, and then all these other teams are going to have kind of a play-in series. So all these other guys, like, for example, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Blue Jackets, the Edmonton Oilers, the Chicago Blackhawks, they'll play 5-game series at first. And then after those 5-game series, it will be set 16 teams for the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'm looking forward to this. This is awesome.
So is it all going to be just structured as in a playoff format, and that's it?
Yeah, it's pretty much just full-on Stanley Cup playoffs. The only thing is they added in those extra series. So the first round will be a best-of-5 series, and then after that they'll have the 16 teams, and they'll do the regular Stanley Cup playoffs that we're used to.
Okay.
With
so what do you think about
16
that,
teams.
setting it up as playoffs? I mean, I guess if you have to shorten the seasons, it does make sense to go that sort of route.
Yeah, I think as well. I think this is a good plan for the NHL. It gives teams all a chance. It's kind of a rebirth of the season. It gives teams like the Chicago Blackhawks and Montreal Canadiens, who were fighting for those playoff spots before the season ended back in mid-March. It gives them all a chance, and quite frankly, 2014 Stanley Cup playoff, this is awesome.
What's so interesting is that you don't have audiences in the stands, so that cuts revenue to the facilities, of course. That cuts revenue to the teams. It's not going to be as profitable, although the ad revenue on TV will certainly be more pronounced than it has been of late, certainly for sporting events. But the thing is that when you're looking at the economy and the economic impact of sports, it's such a significant part of the American economy and way of life that this is going to take some adjusting to, although I think people will at least be relieved about being able to watch sports again, even from just the comfort of their own home. But in terms of the economic impact, it's going to be far more subdued. And that's going to be interesting. Remember Rick French, owner of the Daytona Tortugas baseball team, which is the minor league team affiliated with the Cincinnati Reds. He was on this show a couple of months ago, and he said, I'm not so sure that the MLB will come back because, or at least not for a while, particularly because it's just not something that you can do easily when it comes to the financial side of the equation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at sports, it's not just watching sports that contributes to the fans. It's going to the stadiums. It's having the concession stand. I mean, think about how big concession stands impact the economy of sports. So I could definitely see what he's saying. I mean, all this is just from the fan perspective. It's going to help the fans. It's going to bring back sports. But economically, the challenges, I think, are still there for sports. Literally they got the broadcasting companies like Fox Sports, CBS.
Is it exclusive contracts, by the way? So like the chart that you showed was Fox Sports. Are they basically Fox Sports gets a sport and ESPN gets a sport and the regular TVs? Is that kind of how they're doing some of this?
Yeah, so Fox Sports typically gets the NFL. They get NASCAR. Those are probably their two big ones. CBS, it's NFL and golf. ESPN
So
is
it'll
typically
still
with
stay the same.
with the NBA. Yeah, it's going to be the same for the most part. However, I have heard that possibly ESPN might get a slate of games for the National Hockey League. I'm not positive for that, but they might switch it around a bit. But the bottom line, I think, is these broadcasting industries are going to be carrying the sports economically because that's all they have, because there's no concessions, there's no fans, there's no ticket sales. So I can see what you mean on the economic.
Yeah, although your point about fans is so important because our society needs sports to return so we can have something that people can just take a load off and have some fun. Although it will be interesting to see how protest movements may get into sports. Certainly when the NFL comes back, there will be kneeling during the national anthem, but you may see the politicization of a variety of these sports, which I'm not looking forward to that. Set aside the merits of the case, especially after we've been dealing with such tension and so many issues going on. In watching sports, I would like all of us to be able to just take a load off and relax and enjoy it without having any political dynamics or social dynamics come into play, even if someone can make the case that it is a worthwhile cause.
Yeah, and well said. And I mean, with bringing politics into sports, I just don't agree with that. Sports is a time where we can put our differences aside. We can come together. We can watch the sporting events and be with family, be with friends, without having those political differences, without being divided. Sports does not divide us. Sports brings us together.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that, Nathan. Sometimes sports can really divide divide people a good bit. I mean, you look at some of the fans in some parts of the country, especially they could get pretty rowdy or pretty divided.
Definitely.
I certainly know. Growing up being New York Giants fans, my parents always said you cannot say the word hate unless you're talking about the Dallas Cowboys. So division, right? But no, your point's well taken. Is that people are coming together? It's like music. People are coming together to enjoy an occasion, as opposed to getting cutthroat over issues of the day or trying to one up one another in that sort of way. And I agree. I mean, that's the reason why I would like to see not the return of sports not involve politics. I expect it's going to happen with the NFL. We already know that players and even coaches now have expressed that they are going to do kneeling on the field. I hope other sports don't follow suit, not simply because of the political stance and that debate in and of itself, but the ideas we're talking about of not bringing politics into the fray. But I'm curious, just one final question as sports proceed. What do you think could be the reaction from fans as they start watching it and they see things are a little different and they're a little quieter and what have you?
I think the reaction is still going to be the same as it always was, because when you're a sports fan, you're always a sports fan, and no matter what the circumstances are, when you see those players fighting for a championship, fighting for that Stanley Cup, for the Lombardi Trophy, everything just comes into place. I think it's going to be really different, especially football. Watching a football game without fans, that is very interesting in itself, because you're going to hear everything. In the trenches, you're going to hear the grunts of the linemen.
That's going to be strange.
The grunts of the linemen, the snaps, the audibles out from Aaron Rodgers, from Drew Brees. You're going to hear it all, and it's going to be, I think, bring a little extra fun to the game.
Nathan Matoush, producer extraordinaire, working the Matoush magic and breaking down what's happening in the world of sports, which is significant to the American way of life and the American economy. Thanks for popping on today, buddy.
I always appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun here at Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Once again, Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush magic, joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Well, that is it for us today. Tomorrow, Max McGuire from Conservative Daily and host of the Conservative Daily podcast is going to be on the show. By the way, I will, in 40 minutes, be on with Max on the Conservative Daily podcast. Be sure to tune into that at Conservative Daily on Facebook and on YouTube. And I hope you have a great day. Sign up for members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com to the membership program for the Crossroads Club. Please also subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not done so already. youtube.com/JimmyAtTheCrossroads. And my thanks to Nathan Matoush, to the Washington Examiner, to Nihal Krishan, reporter at the Washington Examiner, guest today, to you for watching and participating. And as always, stay well, stay healthy, and may God bless the United States of America.